1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And your folio is there.
6 or 7.
Are you happy with the temperature? Colder? Warmer? Need a bit more than what's there we go.
Right. Never seen these before. It's always exciting when you think, oh, did you though? Hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. Hello. Thank you to some of you. I've noticed you've come back since 3. I can't have been that shit then, can I? Right, so that's good. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Deb. I need to do it. I don't know. I think he said it was in the right place. No idea.
Maybe it's you moving.
Yeah, it's because I move out of it all the time. But thank you. But I do. I fucking hate being on camera. Sorry, camera.
The camera doesn't mind. She doesn't feel pain.
Well, I don't know. I need to ask her. Maybe she's a sentient being and needs consent. Right. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deb. I call myself a kink shrink on FetLife. I am a psychotherapist. That's what I do for a living. I do specialise in kink. There is no such thing as a specialist in kink. Go figure. There isn't. You might be able to take the odd course, so that who's teaching it. You can do a PhD in something, but that doesn't make you a specialist in any way, shape, or form. This is about life. This is about experience. And I also happen to be kinky. I also happen to be queer, more heterosexual when it comes to my relationships. And I said this earlier. I'm a submissive and I'm also a cup queen, but I've also switched for 20 years. But for the last 20 years, I haven't as much. I'm more of a cup queen. That's my main focus for my relationships. So poly have been as well for those 40 years. Come on in, there's a few spaces around. So I do a lot of workshops. I do a lot of teaching. Again, what qualifies me for that? Fuck all, honestly. Do not believe, I just heard you, if you don't mind me saying, I just heard you saying, come to workshops and stuff, and it is good, it's really good to come to workshops, but question the fucking person doing the teaching. Because what qualifications have they got? How do they know this stuff? Where have they learned it from? Don't believe everything you hear. And that's really important. Come on in, sit wherever. It's really important when it comes to kink. There's one here.
It's all right.
I think they're together.
What? Together.
Oh, that's very kind. We like that, don't we? Look at what a bunch of saps we are. Who says kink isn't romantic? It is. And sweet. Right, so please question everything you hear. Question everything you read. Take everything you read and with a pinch of fucking salt. Question a person, me, anyone who's doing any teaching. Who said you should be up there? Why should you be up there? I'm up here because I fucking volunteered to do it 7 years ago. That's why. So, and do I do it for glory? Of course I fucking do. Come on. Really sorry, but it feeds my ego, which is very nice. Thank you very much. We've all got one. I know you all think, no, I haven't. Yes, you have. You might keep it in the dark, in the cupboard.
Or not.
Oh. All right, that was really funny. Very personal, but very funny. And it gets me business. People ask me, so that's good for me as well. Not that I have a lot of space, because I don't really. And I love doing it. It means a lot to me. Plus, for me, it's my way of giving back. I really love to give back in my community. Hence, I do this, and I also run a workshop on a Thursday night free of charge for anyone who wants to come on Zoom. 2 hours every week. If anyone here is a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a counsellor, this counts as an hours free CPD. So whatever you do, get in contact with me, get the CPD certificate because it is for free. And I mentioned this earlier, an hour of CPD out there in our world is 60 quid often, or 60 quid for a couple of hours. It's really expensive stuff. So, feel free to contribute to this as well. Dovey just gave me these, although I've never seen them before. So it'd be interesting to see if I can use them and how I'm going to use them. I want to talk about consent today. So we run this workshop every so often. What does consent mean? Anyone? Sorry? Permission for? Yeah, exactly. Whatever. Okay, what does consent mean to other people?
It's a contract.
It's a contract. Okay.
Teacher and I had to teach the kids the like legal definition of it a couple of days ago. It was like if I can remember, like knowledge of what you're like giving permission for to happen, like to do what to happen to you, and also like a full understanding of what you are giving permission for, so that you can't be drunk. X, Y, Z.
Yeah. So, anyone else got anything they want to add to that?
It's always ongoing.
It's always ongoing. It doesn't stop. Doesn't change, but it does. That's the problem. So it's maybe not ongoing. Anything else for anyone? Good old word consent.
Can be withdrawn.
Can be withdrawn. Yeah, very important. Blue balls do not exist. I'm really sorry. If you have them, they do not exist. They might be a feeling sometimes, but they're not an actual physical thing. It's just a bit of extra blood. So, yeah, it's very interesting how that's used as an excuse for some people, and that's not just having a go at penis owners. I'm going to have a go at everyone today. Trust me, you're all on the list. Right, so, consent, it does not exist. Let me start with that. Why do I say that? You cannot consent to violence against you as a kinkster. That's the first thing to think about. You cannot consent to violence against you. Anyone here have ever had a love bite in their life? As a kid, growing up, or anything? You fall foul of the first legal definition from the 1800s that said you consented to violence against you, because it is more than a trifling or transient mark. The law does not recognise consent when it comes to us. Anyone here a bottom, like a sub, whatever, ever had a bruise or a mark because of it? Yeah? Again, you've broken the law. Anyone here ever hit anyone hard enough to leave a mark of any kind that lasted more than 20 odd minutes? You have also broken the law, right? It's really important to think about this. So consent does not exist. This is really important for you to really grab and realise. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about consent. However, you need to realise that in law it does not exist. You cannot consent to violence against you. So, I'm going to America in the next few weeks. I don't have any dirty pictures on my phone. Why not? Well, honestly, you want to go abroad, those motherfuckers, as you go through customs, have more rights than anyone else that you can imagine. The police, all of them, they don't need a warrant to come into your home. They can just come in. Customs have the most amount of privilege when it comes to any form of law enforcement. If they want to look at my phone, they have a right to ask to look at my phone, believe it or not. I do not keep any pictures. Who here is on FetLife or a website at all? Anyone got any kinky pictures up? Good luck with those, because they can also be used as evidence against you and your partner. Please start to think about these things really seriously. Anything more than a trifling or transient mark. Now, you might have got arrested for that. Let's say I'm a bit mouthy, me, never, right? I'm a bit mouthy to some customs officer as he's grabbing one of the kids that I'm with, and I'm saying, "Oi, mate!" And he goes, "Ma'am, step back." And he's got a fucking big gun, right? It's quite a turn on, but probably going to step back at that point, and he can do what he likes. I mean, you'd be very surprised at the rights that they've got. So, and if I get arsey or something happens to me and he decides to take my phone or investigate me, they're not looking for that, but if they find that, they do have a right to do something about it. Because there are 3 or 4 laws, and you can look up the laws. It's really easy. There's an 1860s law. There's some more current laws when it comes to domestic violence. And there's also another law that states how we are not allowed to have certain material, although we've rescinded some of those laws as well. But you can't consent to violence against you. So even if you turn and say, "But I wanted them to do it," they say, "That's nice, it doesn't count in a court of law." Even in the UK. Even, especially in the UK. So in the UK, you flummoxed. What the fuck? Shocking, isn't it? So the biggest impact on us is Brown and the Spanner case. So the Spanner case turned around, and which is a group of gay guys who were making a video, and the video was pretty extreme. You know, it was like testicles and nails, and it was pretty extreme. Even if they listen, a lot of people are into that. Don't knock it. Right. So we're all into different things at different levels. I like a black eye. People will go, "I can't believe you like that sort of stuff, Deb. That's horrific." But that is assault, and it's quite a serious assault. Me calling you a fucking cunt over is actually assault. So you'd be very surprised at what is classed as assault in this country. But the Spanner case basically thought that the police saw this movie, videos. Anyone remember those? Good old days, videos. And they found this video, thought it was a snuff video. You don't remember what they are. remember? They still exist. But so the idea is that in a snuff video that somebody's actually being killed during some kind of sexual or pleasant act for the person, the perpetrator. There's some kind of sexual element in it. And they thought it was a snuff video. They thought this person was actually dying. So they spent quite a lot of money investigating the case. And then when they found that it wasn't, and it was about consent, they'd already spent a lot of money. So they were like, not giving up on this, decided to prosecute. No video was allowed as evidence for a variety of different laws that had happened beforehand. However, the defense brought the video in to say, from the bottoms, no, we wanted this. This was our consent. We wanted this. And that was what was used to prosecute them. So your consent means fuck all. Now, in a child situation, I think that's as well, what we're trying to teach people is that consent really matters. You're saying yes, and how you say yes and what it means really matters because it does. It's really fucking important that we get consent. But there are different forms of consent. I have a huge writing about this on FetLife if you want to have a read of it, but it's mainly there. So there are different forms of consent that we can have. Your legal definition was spot on. So you're absolutely right. And it is about a contract. It is about what is it I want to do. And it is about how does this work. So before you do something with someone, I know you sort of you just met this person here and you're like, fucking hell, I wouldn't mind that. You know, what? We've got all that lust going on. And then we go home and we do some stuff together. Then we wake up the next morning and one of us says, oh, I don't know if I should have done that. I feel a bit of shame. I feel a bit of regret. There's a huge increase in retroactive withdrawal of consent. And retroactive withdrawal of consent is withdrawing consent after the act. The problem is you can't withdraw consent after the act unless the consent was coerced or forced or pushed or anything else as well. You gave consent or you didn't. So when you say yes, please think about the yes that you're giving and what to. I had a situation with a client, I said this earlier, every client I mentioned has given me full permission to say anything that I'm sharing. Every client I see, I say, am I allowed to mention you or not? And it's absolutely okay if they say no, never, so I don't. And some say, yeah, go ahead. Because you're never going to meet them, you don't know who they are. He met and caned a woman, they had a great time. They'd share texts to say, she was basically saying, can you cane me till I bleed? I want my bottom to split. It's quite easily achieved, that's not particularly difficult if you know how to use a cane and you've got a certain type of cane. So he managed that. They had sex as well. That was agreed. It's all agreed on text. And she's disappeared. He wakes up and he's like, oh, there's blood on the sheets and whatever. And he's like, okay, well, whatever. It's a shame she's gone. Where are you? Are you okay? Hope you're all right. I didn't hear you get up in the night sort of thing. The police are at his door. And the police said, we need to have a conversation with you. Would you mind coming with us? Which he did very freely. Because she basically said that he was violent against her, caused bleeding, broken her skin, none of which she'd agreed to, and she never agreed to sex. Now, those are few and far between compared to the amount of actually assaults that we have as well, statistically. They reckon the figure's around 7% around false allegations. I would argue it's higher on the scene. Personally, in my experience, I think false allegations hit more towards 20, maybe 25. That's my own personal experience. I cannot show you any evidence, nor can I show you the research. I'm saying after 40 years and being really involved in the scene and seeing things happen myself, I think it's a much higher figure here. You're nodding, would you agree? So I think there's a lot more of that. So 7% out there legally. Of course, a lot of people won't come forward when something awful has happened. There are plenty of people who do not come forward about a rape or an assault or an attack because they think, what the fuck is the point? No one's going to listen to me. I won't get heard. You know, that's quite a big deal as well. And a lot of people do have trauma around attacks in different situations as well. So they're not going to go to the police. Because the problem is your memory, when it comes to law, does not really count for much. Because your memory is so easily manipulated and changed that it doesn't count for much. You need proof. That's really hard to achieve and attain. You might have bruises against you. There's a whole subreddit culture. Reddit has a lot of subcultures. It's very good at that if you read Reddit. But there's a whole group of particular men, cis-born maybe, penis owners, who will actually illegally film their encounters with people, not because they want to wank to it or masturbate or watch it, it's to protect themselves. They would rather show the person consented at the moment and come for filming illegally than be done for rape or anything else. So there are people with private stashes of videos and everything else as well. So privately done, secret nanny cams, all sorts of stuff. Put anyone off sex yet? And this for life, right. This is supposed to be fun. The reason we have fun though is by getting some form of consent or agreement. So let's talk a little bit about the forms of consent that there are. You can have express consent where you've absolutely clarified what's going to happen, how, when, where, why, with whom, everything else as well. It's absolutely stated. We also have, which most of us go on, is implied consent. So if I come up to you and I do that, the consent is that I'm saying she can touch my hand, and she did, naturally, right? Thank you. If I go up and touch her, I'm assuming we're again, so I apologise. I forgot about that. So if I touch this human being, of course, I'm assuming that I can then do something. This is implied consent. This person responded to me. However, I don't know this person's history. I don't know their history of their trauma, of their situation or life or anything else as well. So really what I should say is, I'd really like to hold your hand. Are you okay with that? If I put my hand out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's very different. This is implied. What I just did was express consent. It's very different. So implied and express consent are very different. We also need informed consent. Let's say I've got really sweaty palms. I've got dripping water off me. And I don't know if this person has a phobia against any of those things. I'd really like to, I've got really sweaty palms, I'm sorry, but I do fancy holding hands, is a very different, I'm then giving informed consent. It doesn't mean anything if you touch my hand or hold my hand, so just, would you like to hold my hand? I'd really like that. It doesn't mean anything, it's not going to go anywhere. So now we have an informed rather than anything else as well. So there are 3 different forms of consent. Implied consent is what most people live off in their normal sex lives. Hi. Hi. Yeah? Yeah. It's implied. And we give messages, and there are these things, especially in transactional analysis, called you've got messages that are just here. Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee? Is a transactional message. It goes from one here to the other, but in transactional analysis they talk about ulterior messages. Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee? It means something very different compared to, would you like to grab a quick coffee? It's different, isn't it? Rather than if I'm looking going, hi, do you want to come in for a quick cup of coffee? You feel and hear something else. Hi, hi, hi. It says something different. Well, I thought she meant, I thought he meant, I thought they meant, not going to help you in court. You're statistically very unlikely to end up in court. However, we need to stop negotiating what we mean by consent. Because we can't consent to violence against us, there's a big, the NCWS and FCFW, can't remember, they're in America, they are really working side by side with the police about something called prior consent that's informed and given, negotiated. And there's a 19-page document that they are working with again and again and again to try and say that us kinksters or poly people or whatever, I didn't know they were doing that, how dare they? People go against your consent all the time. Hi, I really want a relationship. My profile, I've done a lot of screwing around. I don't want to screw around anymore. I've had it all. It's fine. That's not my bag anymore. I prefer a relationship and some kind of connection with another human being before I do the things that I do. If I turn around and I meet someone with a profile that says, oh yeah, I really want a relationship. So we get together and I'm like, oh, this is really nice. You can do all these things to me now because, you know, this could be a relationship. This is lovely. The thing is, they've given some kind of implied consent between us both because they're looking for the same thing as me. If they then turn around and go, actually, no, I'm not interested, that's shit. That happens. It's life, isn't it? However, if they're doing that regularly because they just want to get laid, that's not so nice. However, they haven't broken any rule or law. They're just a twat. Don't do that. Stop that. You know, that's not very nice. However, a lot of us do that. Plus, we also know we cannot make very effective, good decisions when we are really highly turned on. Our capacity to think and think things through is impacted by our brain when we have a lot of those drugs running through our system. You make some foolish decisions when you are turned on. Anyone ever made one of those? Quite right, yeah. There was an advert, oh God, with a comedian. What was his name? When he wakes up next to a woman and he's like, oh God. And he grabs his shoes and he goes to creep down the stairs and he's like, oh, fucking hell, I've got to get out of here. But he hears kids and stuff. And then he sees a photo of him and her in this photograph. And he's like, oh, fuck, and he realizes he's married to her. So it's like it's very misogynistic, hideous, whatever, and still slightly funny because those things can be for some of us some of the time. But he's like, oh my God. But that's how some of us feel sometimes the morning after. We have a lot of regret. But that doesn't mean you didn't consent. You could have done it at the time. If you are pissed and they are pissed, who is to blame? Please tell me. Both of you. We hear things here so many times of, I met this person maybe here, we went home, I was absolutely legless, they were absolutely legless, we had sex and I didn't agree to it. What do you mean you didn't agree? Well, I didn't say expressly, but was there a stop? Was there, who do we blame? What happens there? Like, who the fuck do you say did something wrong? How did that come about? It's something we need to find out about what that meant. Because if there was a yes at the time, yeah, but I didn't mean it, I was pissed. Yeah, but so were they. So who is to blame? And in those scenarios, often what we will do is blame the man, interestingly. So, and that's not always okay, because actually if he's had 20 pints, I mean, how he can get it up is beyond me, but if he's had 20 pints and she has had 5, actually he, she, they are more incapacitated in that moment. Who is to blame? And the problem is we can go in from a moral standpoint and say that's not right, but we're not talking about morals here, we're talking about the law. And the law is different to morals, and the law is different to justice. So we try and say, well, that's not right. That person should be strung up and shot. Maybe so. However, that's not going to get you anywhere. You need to know the law, and you need to know what it means to consent and what that looks like. I personally do not believe you can give really clear consent. Why? Because I don't think you can ever understand how you will feel a year or 2 years or 3 years or even 3 hours down the line. I do not believe, especially in kink, and this is a really personal thing, you say, fuck off, Deb, that's not right. Sorry, can you get out all right? Is the door locked? You know.
Don't mean to interrupt. So.
It's all right, you go that way, so he'll unlock the door for you. So it's really important to understand the implication of consent and what it means. I have hip burster injections. I have to have them once or twice a year. They vary. Why do I have to have hip burster injections? Because I didn't know that being continuously punched would burst my bursa on my hip joints and cause me hip trouble. I didn't know that 20, 30 years ago. I know it now. And I know it now with hindsight. If you're continuously hurt or bruised in a certain area, do you genuinely know what's going to happen to you? Do you genuinely know what's going to happen to you if you feel okay about different things that you say? So I'm just asking you to just be a little bit of aware of the future you, about how it might impact you and how you might feel.
Are you saying then that in the eyes of the law, if you consented during the time and you withdraw your consent later, your consent at the time is nullified?
It's not nullified by the law. If you gave consent and you can prove you had consent, therein lies the thing. So this client had it on a text. So when he went down to see the police, they turned around and he said, no, look, here, this is what she wanted. We agreed it. This is what we said. And they were very good at that time because they said, absolutely no worries, off you go. They could have, however, arrested him even with that because he had caused violence against this person at that time. If that person then withdraws consent, which they were trying to do, because he had proof he was okay. So those texts that you write and delete, maybe don't delete them. Get some kind of writing that says, I expressly want this and this is how I want it. It's not a bad idea. So how do we give consent? What does consent look like? How do you give it? Verbal. You can give it, you can say you can send a text or send a contract or a piece of writing. Now, how do we then get that consent? How do we have that conversation? Just ask. How? Go on. Ask.
Do you consent to me X, Y, Z? Or would you like me to? Or I want to touch you. Do you mind if I do that?
How, where, when, why? And now we start the conversation. It's so complex. It's so complex. It's so easy to say, I want to touch you, I want to hold your hand, but what does that mean? What could that mean between us? So one of the consent models I really like is the wheel of consent. I just got these the other day. David just gave them to me. There's a woman called Betty Martin who does something called the wheel of consent. You can't really see it properly in here, so I apologise. So what she talks about, the wheel of consent, is how we give consent, and it's a 4-way process rather than a 2-way process. What's she saying here? She's saying that there's what you are doing, what they are doing, what is for the other person, and then what is for you. So what we're basically saying with the wheel of consent is, this is what I want. Do you want to do it? This is what you want. Do I want to do it? So it's all about the giving and receiving from both sides. A lot of people, especially in kink, think that DOMs are dispensers. They do. Well, you want to do that, don't you? Or we think that subs are dispensers as well. Actually, you see it both ways. Yeah, but I want to do a caning. Yeah, but I don't want to be caned. Yeah, you do. You're a sub. Come on, like, yeah, but we could do this. No, but I don't like caning. I was talking to a guy a couple of weeks ago, and he kept saying, "Oh my God, Deb, you're so amazing. You're so amazing. I really like you." And I read his profile and I said, "Yeah, you sound great. You seem like a really nice person. You also seem like a fetishist. You have a real fetish around silk and silk panties and nylon. That's just not my thing. It's not going to do it for me. No, honestly, I'm looking for more than that. It won't come into it." Well, if it does, I'm probably out. I'm your Bridget Jones. They're as big as these. I'm fucking comfortable in them, and that's what I'm wearing. They match my bra beautifully. Don't get me wrong. Beautiful orange today. Don't knock it. They've got a bit of lace on, but they're fucking comfortable, and there isn't a lot of satin involved. If you have a fetish around satin, if that's all you want, no. So we start talking, and we talk a bit more. And we talk a bit more. And then I thought of you this morning. Did you? In what way? You were in silk panties. Have you seen me in silk panties? It would put anyone off, I tell you, right? So we're having this conversation. I said, no, really, that's not my thing. It really isn't. And he was like, oh, okay, no, you know. All right. So no, I'm sorry. And then, you know, oh yeah, I thought this. Do you ever buy satin pants though? I've got a satin fucking pillow because my hair's so fucking thin after fucking chemo, so no, I don't wear it. That's the only place it is. So you could rub your knob on my pillow, but that's about it. That's probably as far as it's going to go. I'm just so that it's really true. So he's not interested in me. He's interested in the pants I'm fucking wearing. Doesn't really matter about me. I want you to be interested in me, not what I'm wearing, not what you see a lot of fetishes around latex, PVC, and different things. I've had it before with silk. I don't know why. I must attract silk fetishes quite a lot. They go on a date. Could you wear a silk shirt? No. You can make me in whatever I'm fucking wearing and see if you like me. Because you won't like me, you want the silk shirt. So it's really different. So let's talk a little bit about consent and how it's given. So the wheel of consent is important. You need to start with yourself. What do you want to give? What do you want to receive? Do you actually know? And it's really important to find out those boundaries for yourself. And those boundaries need to be close to your values as a human being, which a lot of us don't know, actually. What are your values? Well, I don't know. Be a decent human being. What did your mum teach you that one? Come on. What else? What does a decent human being look like? Well, you know, is it decent to have, you know, I remember once being in a gangbang, because you do. And I remember having... It was all men, just me. So it was 11 men and me. It was quite heavy going. But I remember having a cock in my arse and my cunt and one on each hand and one in my mouth. And I remember thinking, anyone lets go, I'm going to face plant. I'm like, oh, this is really I'm out for the count, mate. I've broken my nose once already. I want to do it again. Boom. And that's what I was thinking at the time. So it's really interesting. That's not something I'm going to go and share with my mother. I'm sorry. I'm out. My mum died last May. I can't really use her, but she never knew that story because it's not appropriate for her to know. She knows I'm kinky. Well, she did know I was kinky. I'm out. She doesn't need to know the details. When you're pruning your fucking rose bushes, Mrs. Smith doesn't need to know that you took it up the arse last night. She doesn't. She's not interested. She wants to talk about that rose or the scent of it, not anything else. Not you want to do with the thorns. Deborah, I notice you pick up nettles fairly often. Why do you do that? Stuffing them down. Well, not my own kind of stuffing. Maybe. So it's really important to understand what consent means, even in conversation. What's okay for me to say in front of that person? I don't like the aspect of the scene that thinks we're entitled to go out there, wear what we want out there, be who we want out there, especially in front of children and people who do not consent. I'm quite a prude. I want consent from the people around me. Plus, you're starting to break the law. And when you start to break the law, when you start to do things like flash slightly or sex, if I go outside and I squat because I need a pee, and I flash even slightly because I need a pee, I'm on the sex offenders register if someone complains about it. You stand up, you put your penis out there, you're not, because they hardly see anything unless you're flashing it around. It's really crazy. The sex offenders register isn't just for paedophiles. You'd be really shocked about what's there. You can be on the sex offenders register for streaking across a football ground if there are children present. So you think, oh, sex offenders register, that's really bad. No. Maybe they were drunk, maybe they did something stupid, but that lasts for years, and you have to register wherever you go. It's a big deal. Consent really matters. It doesn't exist as such, and it still really matters. It makes the difference. And we talk. People talk. So we know who isn't doing things well. We know who is starting to take the piss. We know what's going on around us. So you need to start with your own values. What do your values look like? What is it you want out of it? And what does it mean? So you must start with you, with consent. Who here is quite new to the scene, under a year? Under 2 years? Okay, so I think it's really important, especially if you're new, to understand that when you meet someone who comes along and says, listen, love, red flag immediately, but this is the true way of doing it. This is the right way of doing it. This is the way you should. It's manipulation. We think about gaslighting in relationships when someone says, if you loved me, you would. Fuck off. Horrific thing to do to anybody. No. If you love me, you wouldn't ask me to do that. And that's still horrific what I just said. So no, that's not appropriate. What we've got to do is understand what it is that we want to do. If you were a real submissive, you would do that. If you were a real top, you would do that. These sort of things are bandied around quite a lot. In order for you to come into the scene, it used to be in clubs and places that you had to suck a cock or have sex or whatever to get into a place to even start to know people. It was a very different place to now. We're much more aware of consent. However, we've gone too far with consent and we use it as a shield and we think it will protect us. If I give you all of my limits, let's say I sleep with you and I say, these are all my limits, am I guaranteed of my safety with you? No, I'm not, because you might be somebody that doesn't listen. You might be somebody that really does and is wonderful and magic and we can have a great time. However, if something misses, because there's also clusterfucks, things go wrong as well. People make mistakes. Any vagina owner here ever had a cock slip into their arse because it was quite wet by accident? Yep, quite a few of us. The person didn't anally rape you. It was a fuck up. It's horrific. It might not be very nice. It can be really painful. It can cause bleeding for them, bleeding for you, tearing for you, and all sorts of stuff. However, it was a horrific accident. No intent was there to hurt anybody or do anything wrong. Wrong hole, wrong position, wrong amount of wetness, absolutely horrific. Or we can say, I understand that wasn't meant. And hopefully the person is saying, really sorry, didn't mean to, shit. There's a difference, isn't there? So consent is about understanding your own values, and it's what you start with. Start with you. Do you all know your own values, your own boundaries, your own limits about what you want to do, how, when, why, who? Do you know them yet? If you don't, really have a good look at that. Because that will tell you that when you meet someone and someone says, well, you should, please never believe anyone who says you should, you must, you ought, in order to be real or anything else as well, because that's a heap of shit. It's really important for anyone new really understanding that. You can be submissive and just tell someone to go fuck themselves. I remember being in a club once. I used to wear white in clubs, a bit different to everyone else maybe, because I wanted to show that I was submissive. I used to wear a lot of white lace, had white leather boots on and whatever. And I was with my partner at the time, dominant. And this dominant female next to me, she just turned around and said to me, get me a drink. And I said, get your own fucking drink. She looks at me with shock and horror, and she passes me, and she speaks to my male partner, and she says, are you going to let her talk to me like that? Oh. Listen, staunch feminist here, staunch believer in rights of all people. Not feminism as in I think women are more than men. I believe in the rights of human beings, of equality, of having the right to do certain things. That's what I believe. Which is different to pure feminism. Don't fucking talk to me like that. What have you done to earn anything from me whatsoever? Just because I'm a submissive. I've had that for the 20 years before that. Where people, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. Life has changed. That's a fucking good thing for all of us. And he said, I think she can do her own talking for herself. I suggest you ask her. Thank fuck. Whereas you've got other dominants who say, listen, you are property, do that. And if you want to be property, That's okay. exactly what that person tells you to do and all of those things. But you've done it with consent, which is so different, really different. One thing that's really important when it comes to consent for me is the acronym FRIES. I don't know if anyone's seen this. Have you seen this? FRIES, consent model? It's quite cool because it's a set of fries. I mean, I'm only happy, whatever. But it's a set of fries. So what the top one says, for me, this defines consent really easily. Freely given. What does that mean? Freely given.
Without coercion.
Without coercion. Without coercion, yep. So no forcing, no manipulation, no changing things. You know, we don't want to gaslight people and say, oh, if you loved me or any of those things. It's without coercion. It's a meeting in the middle. Can I suggest, is anyone here a top? Anyone here a bottom? Anyone here a switch? Right? When you sit around a table, you meet as two equals. Inequality is negotiated from equality, not the other way around. It's really important to think about that. We meet as two human beings, we negotiate inequality. I will do anything you tell me. Will you though? Really? I want you to cut off your little finger. Will you? Actually, I know a few people who will, so that's probably I want you in chastity for forever. Oh, that sounds like a really good idea to a lot of male submissives. Yeah. It's not that fun if if you're not keeping it clean, you don't know what to do, and you haven't had sex in ages, and you really want to, or you want to masturbate, or you want to come. We don't think about the implications for later. We fall in love with the idea of what it is 9 times out of 10. So, freely given. Do I understand without coercion? Do I understand the future? What's about to happen? Do I understand the implications of this? What else is freely given? What about drugs or alcohol? Can someone freely give consent if they are pissed? They cannot. Absolutely right. And that's the way the law sees it as well. And that means drugs too. Any form of drugs, any form. So if you can prove that drugs or alcohol were involved, the person doesn't give consent. Has anyone seen the cup of tea video? Yeah. Look it up if you haven't. It's a great little video. If the person doesn't want a cup of tea, don't give them a cup of tea 2 weeks later. If they are passed out on the floor, they don't want the cup of tea, even though you made them the cup of tea. It's so British. It's brilliant. It's really funny. Terribly British. But it's funny because that's true. Just because you had sex with someone last week doesn't mean that they want sex this week. They gave you consent then, they do not give you consent now. And if the person is under the influence of alcohol or drugs, then they cannot give consent. What if you both drink? So you've got to start thinking about these things. You've got to make your own decisions around them. By drugs, I also might mean some medications. I might mean some mental health issues. If that person is in a really low place and depressed and desperately wants love and care, and you say, you could call it coercion, I love you, come here, let's do this, I'll look after you. Could that be coercion in a way, potentially? Yeah. If the person are they of a free mind to give it if they're in a really bad place? Again, we need to think about that, don't we? How is this person's mental health? How is this person's physical health? What drugs are they on? What difference does it make? Actually, it can make quite a lot of difference. So, for example, anyone here ever taken an antihistamine in their lives? Did you know if you take antihistamine and you are a vagina owner, it can dry up your vagina slightly as well? Did you know that? So it stops your fluids being created in the same way if you take a lot of antihistamines. So I'm not saying that interferes with consent. I am saying that has an impact on you when you do have sex or do have different things. Is wet consent? I love this one. Why not? Because honestly, if I hear one more person say you're wet, you fucking love this, don't you? Actually, I was just thinking about a cat litter, but
I understand that when a woman's raped, she can be made wet, and so it's a physiological reaction.
She can also orgasm.
Yeah.
So if a vagina owner is raped, I'm still going to go with those phrases because they're the easiest. If a vagina owner is raped, they will get wet as a form of protection. So what happens when somebody goes through the turn-on process, when you look at how people are turned on, what happens is, so vagina is a misnomer of a name, but it's actually the wall on the inside of the vagina. You've got your vulva and everything else on the outside. The vaginal wall, what happens on it, it'll expand slightly, the cervix will lift up and it will lubricate to allow space for something to enter. That's the point of it. If all of a sudden you are raped, what's interesting is your vagina can go whoosh and get incredibly wet. Why? because it wants to stop you from having all sorts of infections and problems and other things afterwards. Wet is not consent. Is an erection consent? No. Anyone here ever woken up with an erection? Yeah. Anyone ever here had an erection when you think that's really inappropriate right now? I really don't want this person, but I'm as hard as rock, right? And that happens too. Sorry, problem. I was screaming yesterday for 7 cheer teams like a banshee, so I'm definitely going to lose my voice for the next day. So it's really important to understand that just because I read this story on FetLife about a year or two ago where this woman was saying how her friend's 17-year-old son, you know, she grabbed him, he got hard, so she wanted to fuck him. That's not consent. He was just hard. It is not consent. I know we think it is not. And then what do we do if we've got somebody who's in the wrong gender, in the wrong body for themselves, who has different reactions? Hey, should we think about that as well? Because that's all really fucking confusing for the person having that situation as well. Because there's a lot of body dysmorphia, dissatisfaction, dysphoria that goes on for some people who are not in the bodies they want to be in. That ain't consent. In fact, that's really hurting them as well in their heads. So really think about what you're asking. So freely given is an interesting one, isn't it? How stressed are you? How bad a day have you had? How do you feel? Are you just like, I fucking can't take anymore, just do it? Anyone here ever had sex? Honestly, when you think, I'm really not in the mood, just get it over with. Just do it. Look around the room. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. Is that really proper consent? No. A lot of people do it, however. It also says reversible. What does reversible mean?
Change your mind.
When?
Anytime.
Anytime.
During the process. I have issues with retrospective change of consent.
So do I.
So anytime during the moment, no matter what point you're at, you should be able to say,
Stop.
wait, we need to talk.
And what you find is a lot of people find that really difficult because they feel like they've consented. They feel like they've started something. I remember being a 16-year-old girl at a party who wasn't sexually active. I've done a lot of catching up. So I wasn't sexually active at 16. And my friend and I went to this party and we knew we shouldn't go to this party. I remember wearing my pink and lilac purpley thing. Fuck knows what it was. I would never wear it today. But, you know, I thought it was really trendy and I was really cool. And I was like, oh my God, I'm at this party and I'm going to have a great time. And these two, 19, 20-year-old lads absolutely went for us. And we were upstairs in a bedroom within minutes and his fingers were inside me. I don't think I'd consented to no. And all I can think was, oh my God, this isn't how I want to lose my virginity. It was really a massive thought in my head. But I was like, but I started, do I finish? Oh my God, what about him? What do I do? I'm a kid. And I didn't really know. And I have the right to say, get the fuck off me. Now, luckily, the mum had come back, whose house it was, and she went, get off those girls! And we were like, oh, really sorry. But thank fuck, because it wouldn't have been rape because I wasn't clear. It would have been something else. When someone is deathly silent and still, is that consent? No. It isn't. It really isn't. And we'll come back to that when we look at enthusiastic. Informed. What does informed consent mean?
Having all the facts.
Having the facts.
Where this could go, where this may go. Just understand.
What, when, how, when, why, who. That's what we're agreeing to. Again, I remember reading on FetLife. I love FetLife for this. I'm just like this cataclysm of disasters. This guy had advertised, he was saying, I'm looking for people to come and fuck my wife. She's really up for it. She would love it. She won't know about it because what I want to test is that she's going to be blindfolded with earplugs in and whatever, and she's tied over the bed. I just want to see if she knows if it's a different cock. Your face. Your face was my face when I read it. What even got to me was about the 600 replies that were saying, I'm up for that. I'm up for that. I'll be in. I was in a situation where I was tied on a bed and I didn't know what was happening. My partner had a lot of consent for a lot of these things. I like consensual non-consent, which is, this is my list of things that I'm okay with, even if I'm not in the mood or I'm tired or I'm a bit angry or whatever, you can still do these things, even if I say no. And sometimes, we'll sometimes have safe words, or we use the traffic light system to protect ourselves. That's okay, that's green, that's amber, I'm not sure about that, red is an immediate stop. And I don't think things should be negotiated in the midst of something else. So if that person says, I want you to do this to me, because it's such a turn on, say, I will tomorrow or the next day. Let's talk about it first. Only do what you've agreed to do in those moments rather than going too far, because it's really difficult to take it back. And I said to him very clearly, yeah, I'm up for multiple things. For this session, though, if we're going to do anything like that, I don't want another woman in the room unless she's going to be sexually actively involved. I don't want her just watching. And he went, that's fine. And the next thing I know, the doorbell goes. I'm tied. I'm gagged. I mean, it's interesting, safe words if you're in that position. I hate gags, actually. And I'm blindfolded. But I had something I could drop out of my hand as a form of consent. And I like bouncy balls that light up in the dark or make a noise. And you can get them. Children play with them. They're a really good idea because they're seen easily in the dark and they make a noise. They're a great little consent tool if you are tied up, gagged up, blindfolded or whatever. Get them from Amazon or anywhere. Boom. And down it goes. Test it beforehand because these things run out of batteries. Hear the noise, see the light. You've got a really good form of consent giving there. We started doing something, whatever, and I could feel these different people's hands on me and different things happening. And I heard a female giggle. Without a doubt. I dropped the ball. It stopped. Good partner, good consent. And I said, afterwards, everyone, I went, what the fuck? And he went, oh, it's really annoying. One of this person's staff said she had to come with because she wanted to watch. I went, yeah, but that went against my consent. Where am I in that? He went, I know, it's really difficult because I'd set this up, put a lot of work into it, set it up. It's not easy. You think it'd be easy, wouldn't you, to do a gangbang or do something quite interesting? It's not as easy as you think. You get a lot of no shows, no performers, no all sorts of things that can happen. Lots of people aren't as interested in this as you think. They're all mouths, which is fine as well. That's okay. It's really okay to be experimental. You don't know where you are yet, but don't make a promise. I'll be there or whatever. You know, say, no, I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't want to. And it was interesting because the person had the information. They broke the information, and my partner then broke the information because of the social pressure. We didn't do that again. I was able to tied or gagged. They lost an advantage there. I didn't walk away from the relationship, but they lost something. So it changed things. So informed is all about what, why, who, when, where, how, why. It's all of those different W's and H's that come into anything that's okay. So we need to have informed consent to know what we're actually agreeing to do. And that goes both ways. Who here is a top again? Right, so if you're a top and I say, I want you to do all these things to me, you don't have to agree. Like, I mean, I think that's really standard. No, I don't want to do that to you. That make me feel funny. No, but I'm the bottom. People say it a lot. And you see it in clubs as well. Like, what the fuck? You can call red as a top. It's really important that you know that. You can get drop as a top. You can get all sorts of things. So it's really important sometimes to say, I don't want to do that. I'm not into that. I'm not your dispenser. The answer is no. Absolutely not. So informed really matters. Enthusiastic consent. What does that mean? Sorry?
That keenness.
Keenness. So what defines keenness?
You're involved.
Involved how?
Well, you're proactive and you're responding, you're verbalizing and encouraging, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it can be really confusing in kink, can't it, if we think about it? Because lots of us have fantasies where we want to say, no, stop, please don't do that to me. That would be awful. So we need to agree enthusiastically that if that's the case, we're not going to use the word no or stop. We're going to use the word, a safe word. My safe word is silver. I'm not going to say it in the middle of a scene. It would never come up. People have some odd ones. That's a good thing. We want a word that wouldn't come up in conversation. In the eyes of the law, stop and no is stop and no. So if you use stop and no, that is enough if you're doing a recording for the law to go against you, even if you turn around and say, no, but I had consent. You need to prove or show that you had consent. So somewhere along the line, I'd have written to a partner, by the way, my safe word is silver. If I say no or stop, I don't mean them. However, do you really know that you can say silver in the middle of what you're doing if you're very carried away or if you get scared? Our bodies do very strange things to us when we're scared. And remember, we've got fight, flight, freeze. I mentioned these earlier. Yeah, they are fear responses, but we also have friend, fuck, flop, foe, and fawn. A lot of people will do things because they're very scared in a moment because they don't know what's going to happen. So it's really important as the top or the more powerful one to just step away and say, you have every right to stop this. Is anything going wrong for you right now? I would rather have a disrupted, ruined scene than have a disrupted, ruined human being. Because we can always do it again. And in fact, if anything, I'm way more likely to say, fuck me, you can do so much more to me because you did that. I respect you so much more. You're an awesome human. Whereas if you went too far, I'm like, I'm probably not going to meet you again.
How common are actually such attitudes? In my, albeit very limited dating experience, a lot of people seem to use enthusiastic only as long as consent is implied, even borderline telepathic.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of sections just, oh yeah, this man was so perfect, like he did things to me and it was great, and oh, didn't he ask permission? Like it was so mood killing, it was so terrible.
Yeah, I really agree with that. So you've got to go with the flow and understand it. So it's why have the conversation before you even get sexual, because it will ruin the mood. If I touched your hand earlier, would you mind putting your hands out again? If I say, so we've just snogged, had a passionate snog, and I go, can I touch your hand? Okay, thank you. Can I touch your hand a bit more now? Thank you. Can I touch your hand a bit more now? It kind of ruins the mood. It's not good for anyone, is it? So a lot of implied consent is important. But if you have a conversation way before, I'm talking mainly kink, not just sex here, that's really important. You've had those conversations way earlier, so you understand that you can, a lot of it's implied because I'm not going against it. It's the work you do beforehand, if that makes sense. Often on vanilla dating sites, yeah, it can kill a mood. So what we're saying here, and even with kink, listen, I want all these things to happen. I'm going to go along with whatever happens. And if I say the word silver or things aren't going wrong, I'm just going to say, slow down a little bit. Anyone seen Encanto, the kids movie? Oh, you're missing out.
Can we kill Bruno yet, though?
Huh?
Can we kill Bruno?
No, I really like Bruno. We are talking about Bruno. No. Right, so there's a point where it's really important to understand what consent is and how it works. And there's little bits in the film that shows you that all the way through about what implied consent is and what people have to do. I have to marry this person for my family. No, you don't. You need to talk about it up front. And when people don't talk, they don't get things sorted. Around sex, it's quite easy to have implied consent. I'm talking about an extreme examples here to protect you. You might never come across these situations, and I hope to fucking God you do not. That's what I hope. However, I can tell you, I have definitely had my consent violated. I've been assaulted on the scene. Anyone else here? I've had things happen to me that I don't think are very good. And actually, I'm looking around the room, you've got a lot of older people saying it happens and a younger person too. It's not funny. So we need to understand what it means. And we also need to understand our part in it. If we didn't say anything or we couldn't. That's not about victim blaming. It's about empowering people. I wish we could teach younger people empowerment. Be empowered in your own self and your own skin. So we can. But that doesn't take into account trauma or anything else as well. So it's really fucking complex.
Naivety, I found when I was first on the scene, because I was quite naive, I probably was taken advantage of in that sense.
Someone said to me quite a few weeks ago, what do you think the answer is then, Deb? Education. Go slow. They're the answers. Go to workshops, understand, take your time. If somebody's just interested in getting in your knickers, they're interested in getting in your knickers, regardless of your gender. Doesn't matter what your gender is. If that's all the person's interested in, or caning, whatever, if they're interested in you, they will wait. They can go on and find someone else and do whatever. It's really important to take your time and know what it is that's okay for you. And naivety, I think, is a really big killer in the scene when we first come in. Oh, I need to do that. That's what I do. That's what you do if you're kinky. That's what you do if you're submissive. That's what you do if you're a top. Let's have a conversation as two human beings. It's difficult. So enthusiastic is about given. In France, the rape law is very interesting. When I say interesting, I mean it's fucking diabolically shit, right? That's what I mean. So in France, even if you've got, if this triggers anyone, even if you've got somebody who's underage, if you've got a young woman who is raped by an older man, he's in his 30s, she's 15, 16, if she doesn't fight against him, it's considered consent. They try and change it a lot. But you've got 14-year-old girls who didn't fight, so it's considered consent. How fucked up is that?
Don't they recognise that people can react in 3 different ways? They can freeze, they can run, or
even more. Fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, flock, foe, fawn. So I might have sex with you because I think it's the safest thing to do, even if I don't do it with my consent. So I'm going to fawn. I might fuck you because I think it's the safest thing I can do, or it's what I've been conditioned to do, especially if I've had abuse as a child. So it's 7 or 8 Fs. It's not just the fight, flight, freeze. However, in the UK, that is not the case. We are very much into enthusiastic consent. A no is a no. That's what is considered in our law. A no is a no. That's why we've got to be careful on the kink scene, because we say no all the time. Don't do that to me. No more. Come on. So there's this interesting subtext happening for a lot of us a lot of the time, isn't there? So we've got to be clear. Also specific. What does specific mean?
More data.
Yeah,
More
exactly.
data.
I'm going to cane you.
With what?
Do you mean a Singapore cane? Anyone seen a Singapore cane fully used, especially when it's used in law in Singapore? Anyone seen a Singapore caning?
No.
Don't look it up on a video. Well, maybe you might want to, I don't know. When somebody, the law in Singapore is very interesting about what has physical deterrence or not. There was a case when I was last there where a guy had dropped his cigarette for the third time. He was littering and he was up for the cane potentially. I was listening to the news. It was fascinating. But when someone is given a Singapore cane in Singapore, velcroed into a specialist piece of equipment where they can't get out, and the Singapore cane is so long and wide, every hit will rip you apart. So you're bleeding each and every time. I have a client whose brother was given, I can't remember how many times it was, but he was given something like 12 canes. And you can't lie on your back, it'll put you in hospital and everything else as well. But I want to whip you. With what? A 12-foot bullwhip? It's very different to a 3-foot bullwhip. A small whip, sorry. It's very different to with a riding crop. You're going to whip me. It's very different. So with what? How much? Till when? So specifics really matter. I'm going to fist you. Can I just check the size of your hand? You're all right. You are not all right. You might be, but let's go slow. Right, so that's really important, isn't it? Or I want to do this to you. What does this mean? So again, what we're talking about here is clarity of words and discussion, which if we have up front, it might scare some people off. Look, if it's just sex, okay, it might. If it's our stuff, if we're doing stuff that's a little more kinky and different, or poly, alternative and different relationships, they need conversations up front about what we mean. When I see couples in trouble, thruples, polycules in trouble, it's because the communication never happened. And huge assumptions were made around the meaning of words, of consent, and of everything else as well. That's when I see the most important things go wrong. So that S really, really, really matters.
Do you think sometimes when people don't say what they want, it's because they also sometimes haven't thought about what it is they do want?
Yes. So that's why I was saying it's really important to start to have a really good investigation into your own values and what it is that you want. Or say, I don't know what I want. I'm experimenting. Can we try one thing at a time? Excuse me. Can I have a look at that? Oh, that's interesting. Is that a butt plug? So I open my drawer and there are 30 butt plugs in there, probably know me, right? So, and I'll say, so these are 3 different sizes. This is a wooden one. This has got this pattern on it. This is a ribbed one. This is an inflatable. I don't know what I meant. This is an inflatable one, and things like that. So it's like, okay, so which one do you want to try? How do you want to do this? We need to get into some. I was talking about anal sex the other day, actually, on my workshop. It's quite intricate to teach someone to be able to have anal and have anal well, and to not cause any damage. We're all like, no, it doesn't cause any damage. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So please be, please be aware. Let's start. What do you want to try with? This is a lube that I would suggest with this. What do you want to go with? We'll go really slow. Do you want to do it with yourself first of all? Do you want me to do it with you? How do you want to do this? Specific, clear, informed. And then you can make that decision. Please tell someone if you don't know. I would like to do with you. You go, what the fuck is that? What do you mean you don't know? Yeah, I don't know. Listen, I've been doing this for 40 years and people use the word at me sometimes and I'll say, what the fuck does that mean? There are now so many labels around who we are and what it means and so many terms of all the fetishes and different things we get into. I go, fucking hell, I've been doing that for 20 years and that was cool though. Or whatever. It's really interesting. So I need to understand specifically what that means. Also, don't assume just because you like something that it won't change. In my 40 years, I've changed so many times about what I like, how I like it, and who I like it with over all of those times. And it's changed dramatically. So because you get consent on wing at one time doesn't mean you shouldn't be checking in and asking. In polyamory, we talk about radar meetings, where meetings are regularly had between people. Radar is like it is an acronym. You can look it up, go look it up on the internet. It's really easy to find about the sort of meetings that you can have. They also need to be had in kink. Most kink actually falls flat on its face, and the majority of relationships end up as vanilla. That's interesting, isn't it? I know plenty of people who've met in a kinky way, and then 5 years later, they are completely vanilla. Why? Are you kinky? Aren't you? What's happened? Or poly becomes mono, or mono becomes poly. Why? What's the difference? So we need to keep up with ourselves and have regular discussions about these things, and we need to be informed. So consent isn't as simple as do you fancy it or don't you? But it can be as well, and that's important. I think your question was really important as well when you think about it. It's very confusing in that moment as to how we do things. It's really important to understand if we talk about these things up front, we don't need to kill the mood when we're in it. Anyone got any quick question before we disappear? If not, thank you very much for your